Day 3, final purchase day, all grades. Margaret came in just before 1 p.m. The library was super quiet, and she stood in the middle of it for a second, letting the silence settle before she started moving. She went straight to the displays. She moved the novelty pencils, the bookmarks, erasers, spy pens, fidget toys, chocolate bar rulers, the vinyl stickers, and the phone erasers under her desk. Not gone, just out of sight. She left the chapter books and posters out, the things kids actually came for, the things that didn't just disappear in handfuls. Then she adjusted the main camera, angling it a little lower, a little wider. And then she set up the second one, tucking it behind a laminated sign on the display table. It had a perfect view of the aisle where the boys had ducked behind the shelf yesterday. She stepped back, checked the angle, nodded once. Don walked in a minute later, holding a coffee he'd clearly brought for her. "Morning." Margaret gave him a tired smile. "Morning." "How you feeling?" he asked, voice low. "I'm stressed. I don't know how to contain it," she said. He huffed a small laugh. "I'm staying with you all afternoon. I'll keep an eye on the kids. You handle checkout." She nodded, grateful. "Thank you." "Teachers aren't monitoring today," he added. "They're all tied up with prep and lesson plans for tomorrow, so I'll be the one watching the kids when they come in." Margaret didn't hide her relief. "Good." He glanced at the displays. "You hit everything?" "Everything worth stealing," she said. "If they want a chapter book, they can have a chapter book." He nodded. "Smart." The clock ticked toward 2 p.m., meaning recess would end soon. Kids would start trickling in between 2 and 3 p.m., dismissal at 3:30 p.m., and then after-school stragglers from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Margaret took a breath, squared her shoulders, and opened the register. The teachers drifted in and out of the hallway that morning, none of them knowing what Margaret and Dawn discovered on the cameras. Hillary didn't know, and Margaret kept it that way. She wasn't ready to blow it open yet. The first students arrived early, 5 total, a mix from Cara and Michelle's classes. They came in quiet, polite, holding their money in envelopes or folded bills. Margaret rang them up quickly, Dawn hovering nearby, keeping an eye on the tables even though there wasn't much left to grab. Then, Carla and Carole made their final appearance. They came in together, like they always did, smiling too wide, voices too bright for the hours. "Hi, Margaret," Carla chirped. "We just wanted to check in." Carole added, "Yes, we were wondering how everything's going. And also," Dawn stepped forward before she could finish. "Ladies," they both blinked at him. He kept his tone polite, but firm. "Margaret's got a full day ahead. If you need something, you can come back after dismissal." Carla tried again. "We just wanted to ask about—" "The money?" Dawn said, eyebrows raised. They both froze. Dawn didn't blink. "It's handled, and it's not up for discussion." "All right," Carole said, backing toward the door. "We'll come back later." "Much later," Dawn added. They walked out moments later. The first wave hit right after recess, kids drifting in 2s and 3s, still flushed from running around outside. Dawn stood near the front, arms loosely folded, keeping an eye on the room like a way a bouncer watches a bar on a Friday night. Margaret stayed behind the counter, trying to stay as calm as possible. The displays looked bare. Chapter books, posters, a few safe items. Everything else tucked under her desk where curious hands couldn't reach. The kids didn't question it. They just gravitated to what was left. A couple of them asked, "Where are the pencils?" Margaret smiled softly. "Sold out." They accepted it and moved on. Dawn redirected a boy trying to wander behind the tall shelf. "Stay where I can see you." Margaret rang them through one by one. Dawn kept the tables from turning into a disaster. The camera behind the sign blinked its tiny red light. By 3 p.m., the room emptied again, leaving only the hum of lights and the faint smell of recess sweat. Dismissal hit at 3:30 p.m., and the library filled again, slower this time. A trickle instead of a wave. Kids wandered in with backpacks half-zipped, jackets tied around their waists, clutching whatever money they'd saved for the last day. A few came in with older siblings who stood by the door, bored out of their minds. Margaret handled checkout, her voice soft but steady. Dawn stayed near the tables, keeping the flow moving, redirecting kids who lingered too long near the shelves. "Let's stay in front of the displays," he would say, gentle but firm. Teachers drifted in near the end, a few grabbing books for their classrooms, a few just browsing. None of them knew about the boys. None of them noticed the extra camera. None of them questioned the missing novelty items. By 4:45 p.m., the crowd had thinned. By 5 p.m., the last kid left with a poster tube. Margaret closed the register. Don locked the door behind him. Camera check and office confrontation. Margaret slammed her palm on the desk. How the hell did I let this happen? I should have kept a closer eye on them. Don was standing in front of her, leaning against the edge of the computer. He didn't flinch. Margaret, hey, stop. These things happen. No, they don't, she snapped, voice cracking. Not on my watch. Don't beat yourself up, he said, calm but firm. I'm going to punish them no matter what. But first, we need to talk to Hillary. Margaret looked up at him, jaw tight. Don held out a hand. Come on, let's go to my office. We'll put this up on the big screen. She grabbed the clipboard, shoved it under her arm, and followed him out of the library. Don closed the door behind them and gestured for Margaret to sit. She didn't. She stood behind the chair like she was bracing for impact. He paged for Hillary to come to his office. Can I please have Hillary Singer to the main office? Hillary Singer to the main office. A minute later, Hillary walked in, holding a stack of graded papers. Liz redirected her to Dawn's office. Hi, what's going? Sit, Dawn said. She blinked, startled, and sat next to Margaret. Dawn clicked the monitor. The footage filled the screen, both angles, side by side. The boys slipping behind the shelf, the hands grabbing, the quick movements. Hillary's face strained. Oh my God! Oh my God! I didn't know. I had no idea. Margaret crossed her arms tightly. You didn't notice anything? No, Hillary said, panicked. I swear, I didn't see them do anything. I talked to them about stealing. I did, but... But what? Margaret snapped. Hillary swallowed. I decided not to lecture them. They're stubborn. They don't listen when I get strict. I thought it would be fine. Margaret's voice sharpened. You thought it would be fine? Hillary looked down at her hands. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Margaret's patience snapped. It is a big deal. We counted yesterday. We knew something was off. But I didn't think someone stole until I saw the footage. And now I find out you didn't even bother to lecture them? Hillary flinched. Margaret. No, Margaret said, voice rising. This is your class. Your kids. And now I'm missing inventory because you didn't want to upset them? Dawn stepped in before it escalated further. All right, enough. Margaret turned on him. No, Dawn, Margaret, his voice dropped, firm. Let me handle it. She stared at him, breathing hard, but didn't speak. Hillary looked between them, confused and rattled. I mean, the book fair is for the students, right? Not for your, grifting pleasure? Margaret froze. Dawn did not. He slammed his hand on the desk. Hillary, stop talking. She shut her mouth instantly. He leaned forward. Do you know what this money pays for? Field trips, end-of-year activities, supplies your classroom uses. If we don't bring in enough, those things don't happen. Hillary's face crumbled. I didn't realize... No, Dawn said. You didn't. Margaret stepped forward, calmer now but still sharp. Look at the screen. She reversed the footage, played it again, and slowed it down. Can you identify them? She asked. Hillary nodded slowly. Yeah, I know exactly who they are. Good, Margaret said. Go get them. Hillary stood, shaky, and left the office. It took her 5 minutes to come back, dragging 3 boys behind her, all of them looking guilty, stubborn, and annoyed at being caught. They stood in front of Dawn's desk, arms crossed, eyes down. Dawn didn't sugarcoat it. Tell us what happened. The tallest boy murmured. We didn't have any money. The second boy added. We asked our parents. They said no. The third boy shrugged. So we just took it. Margaret stared at them, exhausted. You thought that was easier? They all nodded. Hillary looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. Don rubbed his forehead. All right, you're returning everything. Every single thing you took. The boys groaned. And, Don added, you're apologizing to Margaret and to your parents. The boys groaned louder. Margaret didn't soften. You're lucky we're handling it this way. The boys didn't argue. They just stood there, small, stubborn, and caught. Don stood behind his desk, looking at all 3 of them like he was deciding how deep to dig the hole. All right, he said, voice low. Here's what's going to happen. The boys didn't look up. You're going to volunteer in the library, Dawn continued, with Margaret, for 2 weeks. Every day after school. No exceptions. All 3 boys groaned at once. 2 weeks, the tallest one said, horrified. Every day? The second one echoed. That's not fair, the third murmured. Margaret leaned forward, voice sharp. You stole from me, from the school, from your classmates. You're damn lucky you're not getting suspended. The boys shut up instantly. Dawn nodded. You're going to help clean, organize, restock, carry boxes, whatever Margaret needs, and you're going to do it without complaining. The tallest boy muttered something under his breath. What was that? Dawn asked. Nothing, he said quickly. Good, Dawn said, because if you give her attitude, I'll extend it. The boys stared at the floor. Margaret crossed her arms. And you're returning every single thing you took. Today. They nodded, miserable. Dawn didn't budge. Say it. The smallest boy swallowed. We're sorry. Margaret didn't soften. You will be. Hilary was still sitting in the chair beside Margaret, hands clasped in her lap, face pale. Dawn turned to her next. Now, he said. As for you. Hilary straightened, bracing. You're not being punished, Dawn said. This is on the boys. They made the choice. Margaret shot him a look, but he held up a hand. But, Dawn continued, you are required to have a follow-up conversation with your class. A real one, not a soft reminder. A full talk about stealing, consequences, and respect for school property. Hilary nodded quickly. Yes, of course, I will. Margaret wasn't done. You should have done it the first time. Hilary winced. I know, I just... He slammed his hand on the desk. Hilary! Enough! She shut her mouth instantly. He leaned forward, voice low and sharp. Do you understand how important this money is? Without it, we don't fund half the things your class benefits from. This isn't a joke. Hilary nodded, eyes wide. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... I wasn't thinking. The office door shut behind Hilary and the boys, and the room finally went quiet. Margaret sank into the chair like her bones gave out. She pressed both hands over her face, elbows on her knees, breathing hard through her fingers. Jesus Christ, she murmured. 2 weeks. 2 weeks with those little shits. Dawn let out a low exhale, leaning back against his desk. They'll survive, and so will you. Margaret dropped her hands and glared at him. You're not the one who has to babysit them every afternoon. No, he said. But I'm the one who has to deal with their parents when they find out. She snorted. Good. Let them yell at you. He gave her a look. You okay? Margaret leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. I'm fucking furious. Yeah, Dawn said. I figured. She sat up again, rubbing her temples. I take this seriously. The money, the inventory, the whole damn fair. And Margaret shook her head. She didn't even lecture them. She didn't even try. Dawn crossed his arms. I know. She just let them walk around thinking it was fine, Margaret said, voice rising. Like stealing is just whatever. A shrug. A joke. Margaret, Dawn said, steady. I told you. I'll handle Hilary. She looked at him, jaw tight. You better. He nodded once. I will. Margaret let out a long breath, shoulders finally dropping. I swear, if she says one more thing about grifting pleasure, I'm gonna... Dawn cut her off with a tired laugh. Yeah, that was something. Margaret didn't laugh. She's lucky I didn't throw her out of the office. You almost did, Dawn said. Yeah, she murmured. I know. Dawn pushed off the desk and stood straighter. All right, let's wrap up. You need to go home. Margaret walked out first, still fuming. Behind them, the hallway lights buzzed softly. The tables in the library looked picked over but peaceful. Dawn helped her straighten the last stack of the chapter books, both of them moving slow. Another year where the kids got to feel a little magic, even if the adults had to hold the seams together. Tomorrow, the library would go back to being just a library. But tonight, it could rest.